You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Bupp has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Bupp.
Well, hello again, guys. This is your host, Kevin Bupp, here with episode number 7 of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking with Leonard Spoto with the Asset Exchange Company. He's the principal and co-founder of the Asset Exchange Company, which specializes in 1031 real estate exchanges. But before we get on to our talk with Leonard, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my week and what I have going on. And I know you guys always like to hear about what Kevin Bupp has going on in his world. So it's been a little crazy, I have to say. 2 weeks ago, we were hanging out in Turks and Caicos, enjoying some R&R and the beautiful sunshine. And we got back and tried to get back into our normal daily routine, and had some issues. My wife started having some medical issues, and about 2 days after getting back from our trip, she started experiencing some very strong stomach pains. And within a day, we were taking her to the ER. I'm thinking that it might have been something, some kind of food poisoning, E. coli, bacterial type, infection or something that she picked up while we were in Turks and Caicos. So it was a scary week. She was admitted Wednesday and actually got released this weekend from the hospital, and found out that she has a very, very inflamed upper colon, and they don't know what the cause is yet. So they've run a bunch of tests, and we're waiting to hear back. So it was pretty scary. You always have that, thought in the back of your head about the big C word, which is cancer, and that's the only thing that kept running through our mind. And we're both young, we're both very healthy, but you know what? It can strike at any time. So we were very concerned about that, and are just so glad and grateful that it isn't cancer, and that whatever it may be is going to be manageable. They're thinking that it's either a viral infection that attacked her upper colon area, or it's Crohn's disease, which I've become an expert in Crohn's disease over the past few days, because that's all I've done is just studied the effects of Crohn's and how to manage it via diet, because I'm not a big fan of taking pills, and I don't want my wife to be stuck on medication the rest of her life. So if that's what ends up being, then we'll have to be very controlled about her diet, and we'll probably go more on a plant-based diet and eliminate all meats and processed foods from our normal intake, which we don't really eat much of anyway. Like I said, we're very healthy. We're both runners. We're very conscious about our diet. But you know what? Maybe we're not conscious enough, and maybe we need to make some changes, which we're willing to do. So, but either way, all is good in my world with my wife. She's back out of the hospital. She's doing good at home, recovering. And that just means that I was on baby duty for a few days, which was pretty interesting. I've got a 3-month-old at home, and it was the first time that my wife was away, or that I had to take care of him without my wife being around, other than just quick jaunts to the store and things like that. So it was it was not challenging, I wouldn't say. I mean, it's very doable. We bond. We got a chance to bond together and hang out, and it was actually a lot of fun. But the evening time is the toughest, trying to put him to sleep. For all you guys that are on the call that have kids, that. Come the evening when you're trying to put them to sleep, it can be so difficult. And then, they wake up every few hours to feed. And it's very challenging getting in that type of sleep pattern, waking up every 3 hours, feeding him, putting him back to sleep. So I was somewhat of a zombie for those 3 or 4 days she was in the hospital. And I'm glad that she's back, that we can, now kind of jointly take care of him again. So I'm sure there'll be more days like that where she's away and I'll have to care for him. But, it's good to have her back. So an update real quick on the properties that we're working on. We still haven't closed on the Georgia mobile home park yet. It's set for February 17th, so all is looking good on that end. And we've started identifying some additional opportunities through this mailing campaign that I've been talking about. And I'm actually going to be leaving here today after I get off this call here, and I'm going to head out and look at a few properties. We've got a 20-unit mobile home park, a 36-unit mobile home park, a 25-unit mobile home park, and then a couple smaller multifamily properties that are about 12 to 15 units in size. Got a larger apartment building that I got a call on, but I have to tell you, there's some of these sellers are crazy, and they think that their properties are made out of gold, and maybe they are to them, but in the real world, I mean, it's based on an income analysis. And this guy called me with this older apartment building in Clearwater, Florida. It's a 60 unit, and I know for a fact that properties in this area sell typically between $30,000 to about $40,000 per door. And he called me and told me he spent half an hour on the phone telling me about how great this property was, and I was just trying to really drill down and get some of the broad numbers that I need to do my initial analysis. What do they rent for? What's the current occupancy? And he just kept blabbing on and on and on. And once we finally got to the numbers, he stopped and told me, well, no matter what I tell you, I still want $60,000 per door. And I asked him how he arrived at that number, and he just told me that's what it's worth because he says so. And so that pretty much ended the call. And maybe a year down the road I'll follow back up with him. Or I told him to give me a shout at a later date if he ever truly considers selling the property, which he didn't really like that comment. But either way, some sellers just they're not at the point in their lives where they're ready to sell. They would sell if some idiot came along and paid him $60,000 per door. Absolutely, he would sell, and he would make out like a bandit. But this idiot here is not going to pay $60K per door, so he can keep having that hoop dream and just know that I'm not paying that, and maybe one day down the road he'll get motivated and something will happen to where he'll have to let it go and truly need to sell, and we'll pick it up for the the $30,000 or whatever it's worth at that point in time, price per door. So I also had an awesome talk a little bit earlier today. I had an interview, and this is going to be on one of our upcoming episodes. I had an awesome talk with Ken McElroy. Ken's a rich dad advisor, an advisor to Robert Kiyosaki of the Rich Dad Company, and he's built a huge portfolio. He's in the multifamily game. He's got currently 9,000 units that he owns and manages in his company. He's got a staff of about 150 people. He's been doing this for about 20 years. They also do some ground-up developments. I think he had told me they've got 5 projects that they're actually already broke ground on and raising up out of the ground as we speak, which are all apartment projects. So that's going to be one of the future episodes. Probably 2 or 3 weeks down the road, we'll put that up in one of the upcoming podcasts. But it was a great talk we had, and I think what we're going to do with Ken is he's got so much knowledge to share, and he's been doing it for so long that we're going to make it a 3-part series. I couldn't cover in the normal 30 minutes with him what I wanted to, and so what he agreed to is that we would have a second and third episode, a total of 3, and we would drill really, really deep. The first one's just kind of a broad overview of his business, how he got to where he is today, and then the second episode is going to drill a little bit more deep and how he really evaluates properties, talk specifically about a few of the deals that he bought or turned down. And then the third episode will drill really deep. I mean, we'll dig down to entity structure, how he formed, how he has his entire organization structured, why, and many more things. But I mean, we're gonna extract as much good information out of him as possible. So it's going to take 3 full episodes to do that. And just a few more things before we get on with this interview here. I've got a couple cool things coming up that I'm going to be attending. In fact, one of them, tonight I'm going to be attending our local RIA group, which I normally don't attend because a lot of times they're a waste of time. But I shouldn't say that because, every once in a while I'll meet someone there that's either going to be a private investor or a partner or someone that's just a good person to know. So I definitely encourage you to go to your local RIA. Some RIAs are better than others, but just go, and you never know who you're going to meet. I have this class. In addition to that, what I was going to tell you is I have this the seminar that I'm going to be attending here in a few weeks called the Pitbull Hard Money Conference. The Pitbull Hard Money Conference. I'll say that 5 times in a row fast. With Leonard Rosen, and he's been doing this for like 20 years. He teaches on how to become a hard money lender. And I don't want to become a hard money lender, but I thought that it would just be an incredible networking opportunity for me to go and meet others there that probably have money, that are probably there wanting to learn how to become a hard money lender because they want to lend out their money. So I'm going to go there. It's a 1-day, 8-hour ordeal in Fort Lauderdale. I think the cost, when I signed up, was about $300. It might be like $500 now, but I've read reviews on this class in the past, and he gets a top-notch panel there and just covers some great content. So I'm going to go there with the intent of leaving with at least 5 contacts of individuals that have money, that have an interest in lending on projects that we're currently working on. So I'll let you guys know how that goes once I attend the seminar, and I'll give you a full update. And last but not least, any questions you guys have, you're going to hear me say this every episode, so you're probably going to get sick of me saying that, but any questions you have relating to real estate or any topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please either email me directly at kevin@kevinbupp.com or go to my website, kevinbupp.com, and on the right-hand side of the homepage, you'll see a red button that says Send Voicemail. It'll allow you to actually leave a voicemail directly from your computer, and it will send to my email, and I will either respond back to you directly or answer your question on the show. But without further ado, let's get on to the interview with Leonard Spoto and some of the things you're going to learn in this interview with Leonard. So number one, it's a great interview, so definitely get a pen and paper ready to take some notes. But you're going to learn how a 1031 exchange can help you build and preserve your wealth. You're going to learn the basic structure and steps taken to perform a 1031 exchange. You're going to learn the biggest mistakes made by new investors when trying to perform a 1031. You're going to learn about the 4 different types of 1031 exchanges that there are. And you're also going to learn why you'd be foolish not to roll your property into a 1031 exchange. Leonard's going to cover all these things and more. But without further ado, let's get on to the interview with Leonard. All right, guys. Well, like I mentioned, today on the show, we're honored to have Leonard Spoto with Asset Exchange Company. He's the principal and the co-founder of the Asset Exchange Company, which is a leading provider of 1031 asset exchange services. He's also a frequent keynote speaker and accredited course instructor on the subject of 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. He's presented his popular real estate and tax workshops to over 12,000 realtors, lenders, title professionals, and investors, and is also the author of dozens of published 1031 exchange-related articles. And I'm sure your resume is a lot more extensive than that and your background, Leonard. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a few minutes to kind of give your background to our audience and tell them a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I have been in real estate and finance for, I guess over 20 years now. Started right out of college at a mutual fund company called Franklin Templeton, and then worked at LoopNet for a very long time. Started LoopNet as probably the LoopNet, got into 1031 exchange business and have been doing exchanges for about 13 or 14 years now. All
right. Well, fantastic. Well, just so we can kind of start off on the right foot, would you mind taking a few moments and tell our audience what is a 1031 exchange for those that don't know?
Yeah, good question. So an exchange is the process of deferring capital gains taxes. So people call it a 1031 exchange or a tax-deferred exchange or a Starker exchange, but really what it is it's using the tax code to defer your capital gains taxes. And there's a process outlined in Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code that allows you, if you follow the guidelines, to basically defer capital gains taxes on the sale of an investment property. Try to go out and exchange into another investment property. It's really that simple. Now, we can talk all about the details and the timelines and everything, but when people ask, well, geez, what is an exchange? It's simply deferring taxes, exchanging from one property to another.
Okay, so essentially kicking the can down the road and just keeping that momentum rolling and not having to pay taxes.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Well, can you kind of break down the basic process or the mechanics of using a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, I always tell people whenever they call my office or when I meet them in workshops and seminars, there's 4 basic guidelines you need to remember when you're doing an exchange. And there's, exchanges that are very simple, exchanges that are very complicated, but they all are going to follow 4 basic guidelines. And the first of those guidelines is that the properties must qualify. So when you do an exchange, your properties have to qualify, and the way a property qualifies is it has to be used for business or investment purposes. It's really that simple. The property you sell and the property you buy in an exchange have to be used for business or investment purposes. Can't be quick flips, cannot be properties that you live in, have to be investment or business use properties. So that's guideline number 1. Make sure your properties qualify. Mm-hmm. Guideline number 2 is if you don't want to pay taxes, you want to defer all of your tax bill, you have to reinvest all of your cash and purchase property equal or greater in value. Guideline number 3, you have 180 days to do your exchange. And guideline number 4, you need to identify what you're thinking about buying on day 45. So obviously we can kind of dig into the weeds in each one of those steps, but those are the 4 basic steps. Number 1, make sure your properties qualify. Number 2, reinvest all of your cash, purchase property equal or greater in value. Number 3, you've got 180 days to do the exchange. And number 4, identify what you're thinking about buying on day 45.
Okay. Would you mind digging a little bit deeper let's start with the property qualifications. What types of properties qualify for an exchange?
Yeah, so business or investment properties will qualify. So that could be, a gas station. The real estate on the gas station would qualify. That could be a rental home. It could be a $25 million downtown office building. We've done exchanges on all types of those properties. Let's talk more about what it cannot be. It cannot be a home that you live in, and it cannot be a quick flip. So a lot of people call me and they say, well, geez, I bought this property and I fixed it up, and 6 months later I sold it. I don't want to pay taxes on it. It was an investment, so I'm going to exchange it. Well, the IRS actually looks at those type of properties as inventory. When you buy something to specifically hold and resell or fix it up and resell, that's inventory, and inventory cannot be exchanged. So in the industry, we kind of have a general guideline that we tell clients they should hold properties for at least 12 to 24 months before they become exchangeable. And when we say hold it, we mean own it, rent it out, depreciate it, report the property on your taxes as an investment, and do it for at least 12 to 24 months, and then you should be okay. Now, we don't have a hard and fast rule. We can't say exactly 12 months, or we don't say exactly 24 months, because the government doesn't tell us. The government just simply gives us a kind of a vague guideline that the property has to be used as an investment, but because we've had the fortunate or maybe the unfortunate experience of being audited and our clients being audited, we know that if you don't hold it at least 12 months, you probably aren't going to pass an audit. Some of our clients will get real aggressive, maybe 10, 11 months, but if you want to be able to pass your audit, you want to hold it for at least 12 months. If you want to know you're going to pass your audit without any problems, 24 months.
Okay. So let's say you've got a client that's been holding a property in an apartment building for 24 months, and they go through this process and they get turned down. They don't meet the requirements of the IRS, and they're not approved for the 1031. What would be the reasons, some of the reasons that the IRS may not approve them for the exchange?
Well, Kevin, that wouldn't happen. So in a situation where a client owned a property for 24 months, it was an apartment building, clearly an investment. That type of situation, the IRS would not have a problem with it. They would not disqualify it. A more typical situation is you have a client who, let's say they bought an apartment building, and then 11 months later or 10 months later, they said, well, geez, I don't really like owning this property. I got an offer from an unsolicited buyer, came in, and now I'm going to sell it and I want to exchange it. Well, in that situation, the IRS could come in and say, well, geez, you just didn't hold it long enough. 10 months isn't a long enough time. Can you prove to me that it was your original intent to use this property as an investment? But then you have to do some, convincing. And the more articulate you are in your argument with the IRS, the more likely that you'd have your audit upheld, the less of a compelling case you can make, the higher chance you'll have your exchange disqualified. Okay.
Well, fantastic. Well, how about the timeline? Can you speak a little bit more to the timeline? I know there's 180 days that are given to actually complete the transaction, but can you speak a little bit more in depth to that?
Yeah. So when you do the 1031 exchange, you are given exactly 180 days to complete the exchange. That means when you sell the property and close escrow, your exchange starts, and that's day 0. You then have 180 calendar days, so Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, holidays all included, and you must purchase and close on the replacement property on or before day 180. And it's really easy for the government to take a look in an audit on whether you met that deadline or not, because when you buy and sell, that's part of the public record. So all they have to do is a simple calculation. Did you meet that deadline? If you were off by 1 day, let's say you couldn't close until day 181, the government's going to come in and disqualify the exchange and take your tax dollars. So the IRS's job, obviously, is to collect tax revenue, and they will do that from you even if you miss your deadline by an hour, a day, even a minute. They're pretty aggressive.
So Uncle Sam does not give any extensions or any leeway.
They don't. A typical client, won't have a problem with that 180 days, but every once in a while we get someone who really pushes the envelope. In fact, we've had clients who've called the IRS requesting extensions because maybe they're just couldn't get the deal done on time through no fault of their own, and the IRS has never granted any of our clients an extension. The only circumstance where the IRS will grant an extension if there is some kind of act of God that prohibits you from doing your exchange. And when I say act of God, I mean Hurricane Katrina, the Southern California wildfires, those type of situations.
Okay, fair enough. Well, identification, that's the fourth guideline that you had spoke about briefly. So that you have to identify a replacement property. Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of what types of replacement property you need to identify, what kind of time frames, and how many can you identify at once?
Absolutely. So, and this is the most challenging part of the exchange because you're going to sell a property, but the government wants you to have an idea of what you want to buy or what you're considering buying by day 45. And 45 days is only a month and a half, so you're going to close escrow. You only have a month and a half to go out and identify potential replacement property. And the problem is you can't go out and identify the entire MLS, or you can't go to LoopNet and identify everything on LoopNet. The government gives you specific guidelines for identifying your property on day 45. And they give you two options and two methods to identify, or two choices in how to identify. The first method for identifying is what's called the 3-property rule, where you can nominate any 3 properties. So on day 45, you get 1, 2, or 3 pieces of real estate. And once you've selected and nominated those 3 pieces of property on day 45, you're then locked into those properties. You can't change your list. So if on day 46, your first property that you're looking at burns to the ground, you can't replace it. You've got to go to option number 2 or 3. On day 47, if option number 2 gets purchased by someone else, you've only got that third final option left, and if you can't buy that piece of real estate, you don't complete your exchange. Most of my clients will use the 3-property rule because most of my clients will sell 1, maybe buy 2. The 3-property rule allows you 3 properties anywhere in the country of any value. So that's the most common way to identify. Now you might be thinking, well, geez, Leonard, what happens if someone wants to go out and buy 4 or 5 or 10 properties to complete an exchange? Is that possible? Yeah, absolutely. You can identify more than 3 properties, but you have to use what's called the 200% rule. And the 200% rule allows you to nominate as many properties on day 45 as you want, but the combined value of all that real estate cannot exceed 200% of what you sold.
Okay. So let me ask you this, and 45 days seems like a pretty tight guideline. Do you find that a lot of your clients start going out and doing the identification process, and they start doing some of their initial due diligence on potential replacements way ahead of time? Is that a common practice?
I wish it was more common, because then my clients would be a lot happier. I would say that the people who successfully complete their exchanges, and probably about 85% of our clients successfully complete their exchange, will start looking as soon as possible. So if you are going to sell property, you might want to, in the back of your mind, start keeping an eye on what's on the market. But most of our clients will start aggressively looking at property once they have a buyer for their piece of property. So a buyer comes in, you have a buyer lined up. That way you feel comfortable going out and maybe even making offers. So you can start looking at property at any time, but if you haven't sold yet, it's not going to do you any good because the property that you're looking at might be gone.
Sure.
So a lot of our clients will start the process once they have a serious buyer. Maybe the buyer has even removed their contingencies. At that point, you feel comfortable that your deal is going to sell. You can feel comfortable making offers or going out looking for properties to make offers on.
Okay. So you make the process sound pretty simple, which I'm sure it probably is pretty streamlined when working with a company like yours. But I'm sure there's also some common hang-ups that occur for investors when they're going through the process. Can you kind of speak to a few of those hang-ups that may occur?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the biggest and the worst hang-up to have is you can't get your replacement property. Mm-hmm. So one or two things you might want to keep in mind when you're doing an exchange is if you don't complete that property, if you don't complete the purchase of the property, you're out of luck and you're paying taxes. Now, that's not the end of the world. So I always advise people, sometimes if you're in a jam, it's better just to pay taxes than to buy a dog property or, get yourself in a bind with owning something that you just don't want. So worst case scenario is you pay taxes, but, that could be a better option in some cases. Now, in order to hopefully get the property you want, due diligence. You need to do your due diligence, and the sooner you start, the better. So some of the binds people get into is they don't realize how quickly the 45 days is going to go. And they will sell the property, maybe take a 2-week vacation to Hawaii, and then come back and start their search. Now, that's going to be a problem. We all know that there's not a lot of inventory right now available on the market, so the sooner you do the homework, the better. Now, that's pretty common sense stuff. Some things that get people into binds that you might not think about is the IRS, when you do an exchange, requires that the taxpayer who owns the property actually be the exchanger. So most of the time that is a person like you, Kevin, or me. We might go own real estate, we sell it, we buy something else, not a big deal. But sometimes groups will come together to own real estate as a group, and instead of taking title in their name, they will take title under a partnership or an LLC. And if you have done that and you have formed a new entity to own your real estate, when the property is sold, that is the entity selling the property, and that is the entity doing the exchange. So, for example, Kevin, if you and I formed an LLC to go out and buy an office building and we wanted to sell it, the LLC is the taxpayer who's selling the property, not us. And that's fine. So the LLC can do an exchange. The LLC can sell property and buy property to complete and defer taxes. But what happens, Kevin, a lot of times is people who own real estate together underneath an LLC don't want to exchange together. So in my example, you and I want to actually take my money and go my own way. You want to take your money, go your own way. Well, that's a problem because you and I wouldn't be selling real estate. The LLC that we formed is the taxpayer who's selling the real estate and the only entity eligible to do an exchange. So those kind of things get people in trouble because they don't necessarily think about those things until 2 weeks before they're closing escrow. Now, we can always, provided we have enough time, work through those issues, but those are the type of things that can snag people up. Now, in the case of an LLC with partners who want to go their separate ways, what we always recommend is that you dissolve that LLC prior to the sale and put the individuals on title as tenant and common owners. That allows the actual individuals to sell real estate under their tax-paying entity. But, like I said, sometimes you only have a week to get that done. It can delay the close of escrow. It could put some snags into the deal. So that is a fairly common thing that I see that will delay a deal or could possibly even kill a deal.
But the IRS wouldn't require that you season that new relationship, I guess you could say, or that new structure an additional 12 or 24 months, correct? That could be done, just a few weeks prior to the exchange being done.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, interesting. So great question. So I like to tell people to season that new ownership structure. So if you took the property out of the LLC and into the individual's names, I tell people that the longer you have as a new owner of the property, as a tenant and common owner, the better. So 12 months preferably. So that means you've got to dissolve your LLC 12 months before you sell. Now, do people do that? Not always. So you can certainly do it 2 weeks before or 2 months before or 3 months before, but it's a riskier transaction. So if the IRS took a close look at that, they might have an issue with it. So there's a possible audit concern there. If you want to have your exchange be bulletproof, you should do it at least 12 months prior to selling.
Love this content? Want to avoid the most common mistakes that most investors make when they're looking to get into multifamily investing? Download our free guide to the 7 habits of highly successful multifamily investors by visiting kevinbupp.com/guide today. All right, let's get back to the show.
Okay, well, that was a big question I had. I'm actually getting involved in a deal right now I'm partnering with, and we actually had this discussion a few weeks ago, and I believe his goals would be to 1031 the money. This is going to be a stabilize and flip deal, probably 12 to 18 months down the road. And
right.
we both wondered that question. What happens? What happens if he wants to 1031 it and I do not?
Well, here's one option. One option for you guys is you could individually form LLCs. You can have your own LLC, and he can have his own LLC. That provides you some limited liability protection. But then you've got 2 entities on title as opposed to one.
Sure.
That you don't have to break up at the end. So.
Right. Okay. Well, great. Well, Leonard, I know there's 4 different types of exchanges. Can you maybe speak to each one of those just briefly, what they are, and what would be the the scenario where one would work and the other one wouldn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple different types of exchanges. The first and the most common type of exchange is a delayed exchange. Client sells a property, has 180 days to go out and purchase replacement property. So most of our clients will do their exchanges as delayed exchanges. You sell and then you buy. Now, another type of exchange that's getting to be a little bit more common due to the market conditions is what's called a reverse 1031 exchange. A reverse exchange is simply the opposite. You buy first and then you sell. So a reverse exchange is buying your replacement property first. You then have 180 days to sell. Provided your property sells within 180 days, it is a tax-deferred sale. Now, third type of exchange is a construction or an improvement exchange, and that is an exchange that allows you to build or improve the property you're buying. So client sells a property, buys a piece of land, improves the land, and completes the exchange. Now, the problem with all of the exchanges we've mentioned is that you have 180 days to get your exchange done. So a delayed exchange, reverse exchange, 180 days. A construction exchange, you still have 180 days. So if you're planning on building from the ground up or improving something in a place like New York City or San Francisco where the permits process could be very lengthy, it's going to be difficult. So a construction exchange, your exchange funds need to be spent on completed improvements by day 180. And, if you're going to build from the ground up in a lot of places, that could be pretty tough. So we see construction improvement exchanges usually done where a client acquires an existing building that simply maybe needs a new roof or, some minor improvements. So those are three basic exchanges that we see all the time. There is one other type of exchange. It's fairly rare, and that is a simultaneous exchange. A simultaneous exchange is simply where you sell and you buy on the same day. Now, we do those. We see those. We don't see a lot of those because it's hard to line up all the stars, but every once in a while a client's able to do it. You sell and you purchase and you close both those properties on the same day.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like that'd be a very, very tough feat to achieve. So,
yeah,
Leonard, can you give us, I have this burning question, which I think I know the answer to, but, is there ever a point in time where there would be a benefit to just selling and paying capital gains rather than exchanging a property if you plan on continuing investing in real estate?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Now, if you plan on continuing and building wealth through real estate, I don't think it makes any sense at all to pay your taxes. If you know you're building wealth through real estate, why pay your tax? Why give a third of your wealth to the government? Now, the only time that would make sense is you don't want to buy the wrong property, okay? So you get into your 180-day time frame, you have to identify on day 45, you can't find anything, and you simply can't find the right asset to exchange into. In that scenario, yeah, pay your taxes. You don't want to buy a dog. But I think for people who are doing their homework and their due diligence, there's always something that you could exchange into that makes viable sense. Now, whether you want to go out to a different state or a different location, that may be a constraint that may force you to pay taxes. But in my mind, if you're building wealth through real estate, I don't think there's ever a good reason to give a third of your wealth to the government. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about that.
I agree.
$1 million in gain, giving $300,000 to the government, you've got to find a new asset now to make up for that loss. That one-third or 33% that went to the government, what kind of asset are you going to find that's going to hopefully rebuild that loss and then produce income on top of that as well? It's tough.
I completely agree. Well, it would probably be easier for some of the people on the call are seasoned investors. They already know what a 1031 is, but there's a lot of people on this that are going to be listening to this call, and they've never done one, and it'd probably be easier for them if you kind of paint a picture a little bit. Maybe give them a few examples of some recent exchanges that you've done. Maybe one pretty simple one and maybe one a little bit more complex, just so they can get a better idea of the every step that goes along in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple good examples that just come to mind. I have a client who just sold a rental property in Southern California in Laguna Niguel for $580,000. Okay. property was their primary residence, and the clients had lived there for a very long time. They decided to move out, get a new house, and they kept the existing property, turned it into a rental. And they had rented it out for several years. The property had been paid off. It was completely debt-free. They decided it was time to sell because they were looking to get more and better cash flow. They sold the property for about $580,000, took all of the equity, put it into a small apartment building, and they were able to more than triple the amount of monthly cash flow that they netted. So we have a lot of clients who are just, single mom and pop investors, simple kind of transactions. You're exchanging from one relatively easy to manage property into maybe something that's a little bit more difficult, an apartment building to manage, but produces a little bit better cash flow. So kind of people moving up in terms of the type and complexity of the deals they're getting into, but doing it because they're getting a lot better return, and maybe they're just trying to get into a little bit bigger, better cash flow producing assets.
Okay.
So that's a relatively simple exchange, and we see people who do those type of deals all the time, selling single-family rental homes, getting into something that is a little bit bigger and better. I'm also right now working on a very complex deal. It's a $25 million $25 million office building that just recently sold. Multiple owners all own the property under their own LLCs. They are all going their separate ways and all buying multiple properties. So we're dealing with multiple sets of attorneys, multiple sets of brokers, multiple sets of lenders. So a lot of parties involved, a lot of money involved, and a lot of properties involved. Mm-hmm. So one, multi-million-dollar, very expensive office building being traded by multiple owners into all separate assets, all buying multiple assets. So that's just a lot more juggling, a lot more work involved on us, and a lot more transactions to work on.
Okay. Well, that brings up my next question I have is the common fees that are associated with doing a 1031 exchange. So do they differ from the smaller, simpler deals to the more complex deals? And if so, what are they? Yeah,
good question. So we charge $750 when you sell the property and $200 when you buy a property, and that's for a standard delayed exchange. And interestingly enough, the fees in the industry don't vary depending on the type or the complexity or the size of the deal. And the reason why is because all 1031 exchange companies will charge a transaction fee to handle the deal, to do the paperwork and draw it up. And that's the $750 and the $200, so $950 transaction fee for delayed exchange. And then we also will hold funds during the exchange process. And part of our fee includes earning the interest on those funds. So for a $500,000 deal, we'll earn some interest on the funds while they sit in the account. And on a $25 million deal, we'll also earn the interest on the funds while they sit in the account. So we do earn more on the more complex, larger deals via the interest or the float that we keep. But the simple transaction fee is not going to change.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds wonderful. So, Leonard, we've like I said, we have some experts on this that are listening to this podcast, but we've also have some new investors that are just getting started. What can these new investors do? They're buying property, they're starting to buy property, they want to do an exchange sometime in the future. What types of things should they be doing today to kind of set themselves up for success in the future? Should they be giving your company a call, talk with you, have a 10-minute consultation? Should they be reading material on your website? What is the best first couple steps for them so they can educate themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the tax stuff is fairly simple, and getting informed about what is possible is always a good starting point. Mm-hmm. So, starting with webinars like this or doing consultations with subject matter experts is always a good idea. So we do free consultations for our clients all the time. They'll call us up and run their scenarios by. So a good 10, 15-minute call with someone like myself is a great place to start. But, also listening to these webinars, reviewing our website, like you said, and we do host webinars and training sessions on a regular basis. But, the tax stuff is what tax people do. So it's good to have a good understanding of this. But, I think the most difficult part in the real estate, game, or especially in the exchange game, is finding the good real estate to get into and out of. So the more due diligence you can do on your market, on the type of assets that you want to own, and the better understanding you have of what's out there, or working with people, like Kevin, like yourself, who can help them find those type of assets, the better. We can always give the tax advice. The tax advice isn't going to change too much. But finding those good deals is where I think the good investors separate themselves from the bad investors.
Sure. You do have some great information on your website. I spent a little bit of time, about a half an hour actually, just kind of going through the different free articles and newsletters that you have. There's video trainings. And you also offer something that's pretty unique, which I thought was very valuable, is the tax updates. You can give your email address and receive tax updates as they come available, which I thought could be very helpful for investors out there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing that we do offer as a company that other competitors don't is we do offer all of our clients audit support. So it's kind of like having an airbag in your car. Hopefully you don't get in an accident, but if you do get in an accident, you want an airbag. Hopefully our clients never get audited, but if they do, our tax attorney and his team will provide free audit support to our clients. And every year about 1% to 2% of our clients get audited.
Okay. Well, Leonard, we really appreciate you taking the time with us today. You've shared some great information with us regarding 1031 exchanges. And for all those of you listening, please, if you'd like more information about Leonard and the services his company provides, please visit ax1031.com. Again, that's ax1031.com. And Leonard, that's all we have for today. We appreciate you coming on to the show and wish you the best of the week.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot, Kevin.
Well, all right, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk we had with Leonard, and I hope you learned a ton about 1031 exchanges. And before we get going here, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the free guide I have available on my website, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful Multifamily Investors. You can download that for free by going to kevinbupp.com/guide. Again, kevinbupp.com/guide. And it's a free guide that will provide you the 7 habits you'll need to learn to live by in order to become a successful multifamily investor. I wrote this myself. I base it on my experience in the business as well as from other successful owners and operators of multifamily properties. These are a lot of the rules that they live by and how they've built their business. So it's free. Pick it up. It's only, I believe it's 8 or 9 pages long. It's a very quick read, but it will become a staple to your investing business. I promise you that. And this week we'd like to give a shout out to Todd from Millersville, Pennsylvania, for downloading the free guide. Thanks, Todd. And if you have any questions once you're done reading the guide, please feel free to reach out to me, kevin@kevinbupp.com, or go ahead on my website, kevinbupp.com, and click the red button to the right that says send voicemail, and go ahead and leave me a voicemail with whatever your question may be, and I'll address it either directly or on one of our future episodes. And again, we need reviews and feedback from you guys. This podcast, I do this for you and only for you. So please, if you have a minute, it only takes less than a minute, actually, probably 45 seconds. Go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating. Please, please, please. 5-star ratings are great. Write a review. Be honest in your review. If you think there's additional things we need to be covering, or you love the structure of our show but would like to see a few changes, write it in a review or send me an email directly. I'd be more than happy to make any changes that you suggest, as long as they fit within the model of our show here. So this show's all about you, and I'd love to help you out as much as possible in your real estate investing career. So other than that, guys, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you again for listening, and as always, go make some cash flow happen.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.